Hey friends, happy Wednesday. Welcome to another week of Echo Online. Thanks again, Lauren, for leading us in worship. I love getting to spend that time with all of you. Tonight is a really special night in that we have a guest speaker that is going to be sharing with us tonight. Trevor Rankin, one of our very own Echo students. He had a chance to speak earlier this year. We're so excited to have him back again tonight. I just pray that this message blesses all of you. I'm so excited to hear what he has to say. Thanks for sharing with us, Trevor.
How are you doing, guys? It's great to be with you. I hope you are all doing awesome with all the changes that have been happening the last couple of months, and you're able to adjust to this new way of being that we've found ourselves in, where everybody's kind of isolated in their own spots, and just a lot of changes have been happening. And one of these changes is we find ourselves with a lot more time alone. That can bring up a lot of feelings of loneliness and restlessness and boredom. And I want to talk today about solitude, which is, I'm going to use solitude to mean being alone with God. In our aloneness, we're inviting God into that. And this is something Jesus does all the time. He prioritizes this time of being alone. And this is the same spot that we find ourselves in. We find ourselves in a time of being alone. It's just that we've been thrown in it, and he actually went out and found it instead of being forced to be alone. He went out and actually wanted to be alone. But now that we find ourselves in a time of being alone, it's important to ask ourselves, what value can we get out of that? Because this is a unique time where we're actually alone more than we ever have been for most of us. So we see in Mark chapter 1, where Jesus is beginning his ministry, how he does it is he starts out by being alone in solitude. And so he selected his first 4 disciples, goes over to Simon's mother-in-law's house who is sick, and he's healing a bunch of people. And he's doing all these miracles. It's like, great job, good work, Jesus, solid day's work. Early that morning, the text says, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. And then Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." And Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." Jesus uses this time of being alone to center himself and gain direction as he's beginning his ministry, so he knows how to live his life. He does something bizarre. He just leaves the house he's staying at in the middle of the night, doesn't tell anybody. The disciples are reasonably upset with him, like, don't you know everybody's looking for you? But Jesus just values this time of being alone so much that he just leaves. And it's, for him, an important part of how he discerns what he's supposed to do in his life. And so we see here at the beginning of his ministry in Mark 1 that this is a core part of how he's going to live his life, is he's going to spend time intentionally alone with God. Since Jesus got a lot of value out of being alone and went dramatically out of his way to find time to be alone with God, how can we also take advantage of that? So the way that we get value out of being alone is by inviting God into our aloneness and spending intentional time that's set aside in our day just to be with God. And that is hard. That solitude is really hard because it requires that we rest. We have to rest. If we're going to intentionally be with God, we have to rest. And rest is not something that humans do well. It's no secret that humans are not perfect, that we're broken. And part of our brokenness is we don't rest. We don't rest well. We go through our weeks and we're constantly doing things. We've got work, we're doing work, we're making money, doing school, getting projects done, and we're just always going, and we're thinking, once I get that day where nothing's going on, I will finally be able to rest and I won't be busy, it'll be great. And then that day comes and it's like, oh my goodness, I have nothing to do. I'm so bored. And it's like, well, you just wanted nothing to do for so long. And now you have it, and there's still that restlessness and that tension. It's like, why is that? Why is it that even when we're in a great spot to rest, we still can't find rest? Blaise Pascal has a quote, a fairly famous quote, where he says that all of man's misfortunes are a result of not knowing how to sit in a room quietly. And I think that's true. Us not being able to be at peace and at rest with ourselves and with God is It's the root of all kinds of disaster that we end up working ourselves into. This is a great time, now that nothing is going on, to practice being alone and being in solitude. As we practice being alone with God, it's, I think, primarily about being filled up by Him and not so much of an emptying. There's a lot of, meditative practices that are a lot about emptying yourself of emotion and thoughts. This kind of solitude that Jesus is practicing and showing us is more of a filling. It's a filling of God's love, bringing God's peace and experience His rest, to really try to enter into His rest and bring God into our loneliness. So it's more of a filling and not so much of an emptying. So that when we're being filled by God, we're also being formed to be more in the image of God. And we're being strengthened. So we're getting formed, filled, and strengthened by God. And now, since we've spent time investing in one-on-one relationship with God, we can now bring that, whatever wholeness we've gotten out of those times, back into community with others. I would encourage you guys to practice this, to practice being in solitude. Since we are alone, most of us find ourselves more alone than we've ever been, take advantage of that. You're not going to find a time where the world stops every other week. Like, this type of season doesn't come around all the time where we're just alone and nothing's happening. So I'd encourage you to take advantage of that. Maybe set a timer for 10 to 15 minutes that you want to be alone with God. Block out a section in the day and be alone with Him. And here's 5 things I'd keep in mind while you're being alone with Him is, first of all, bring up what's on your mind, the things you're struggling with. God wants to talk with you about the things that you're struggling with. We might find that it's not always what we expect that is uncovered as we're airing out the things before God that are on our minds. The Bible's always talking about, be still and know that I am God. When we do that and we're still, we're airing things out to God and saying, God, I'm struggling with this stuff. Whatever it is, we might find that there are things that we didn't know that we were struggling with that actually need healing. We might find some ghosts that are hiding in the shadows of our heart that we didn't know were there, or some demons that need exorcising that we didn't know we had. And we're only going to find those if we're taking time to be still with God. This is a great time to do it. So we see this happen in Jesus' ministry. He has just preached to a large crowd in Galilee, which is right by the Sea of Galilee, gets in the boat with his disciples, goes across the lake, and likely going to off to be in solitude with God, to connect with God, to be still before God. But who meets him there is, he encounters demons. A man who is demon-possessed comes to him and says that he has a legion of demons in him. And the text says that it was the demons that drove him to a solitary place. And it's in the solitary place that Jesus meets these demons in this man and ultimately casts them out. And so in our own lives, when we're praying, offering things up to God, there might be things that are uncovered in us that we need healing from. We need exorcism that we didn't know we needed. And it's only in those places of silence and sitting, being still with God and inviting God into our loneliness that we're going to find those things and be healed in that way. So that's the first thing, kind of a long one, but bring up your struggles to God, the things that are weighing on your heart. Second thing is listen to Him. Take maybe 5 minutes out of the 15 and just don't say too much. Just listen to what God has to say to you. And this is a really important part of our relationship with God, is just trying to hear from Him, because there's going to be things that He has to say to us that we're only going to hear when we're silent. Third thing is respond to that. So if you hear something from God, enter into conversation with that, and you might find that there's a nice back and forth that happens, and those can be really, really encouraging and growing and can really form us. And then the last two go hand in hand, and that is to experience God's love and love God back. So ask God to show you His love and feel His love filling you up and His mercy flowing over you, and be enveloped in His peace and enter His rest. We're made to be loved by God and to love Him. So a core part of who we are is worshiping God. So love Him back, worship Him, bless Him, praise Him. Those 5 things of bringing up what you're struggling with, listening to Him, responding to Him, being loved by Him, and loving Him back are really important for us, and are some things that you can do as you're being alone with God in solitude. And then, oh, bonus one. I'd encourage you to be creative with it. Like, do it your own way. You're you. You're going to do it uniquely. And I think that we're going to find that there are things that God has to say to us, lessons he has to teach us that we wouldn't hear and we wouldn't discover if we weren't alone. So I think there is value in being alone. And I would encourage us to take advantage of that. That's what I have to say about solitude, and thanks for listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I can't wait until I get to see all of you in person. Thanks for listening again, guys.